we're thrilled to have here kicking off our final hour here on this Tuesday, 2 days after episodes 5 and 6 went down. There's 4 more to go. He is a champion of the Chicago Bulls 3 times over and was also on the championship team with the Spurs the year after the last dance. He is from NBC Sports Chicago Bulls studio analyst Will Perdue. How are you, Will?
Rich, I'm doing very well, thank you. And let me make it clear, winning never gets old.
I bet it never does, right? I bet it doesn't. What's this been like for you to relive it through this documentary?
You know, it's brought back a lot of memories, but also a lot of emotions. You know, it's almost kind of been, a little reunion for a lot of the players as we've all been reaching out to get former teammates on podcasts and Zoom calls and things like that. So that part's been nice, but it's also been a vivid reminder of, that people have been watching this. And I've been watching it just like everybody else. I didn't get a pre-screening view of it, but it's been a reminder of, some of the sacrifices we had to make, the drama that was involved, some of the tension. I always kind of chuckle. Everybody's like, oh, man, you guys just kicked the Pistons' ass. We're like, just because it was 4-0 doesn't mean it was easy. I mean, every game, came down to the wire. So it wasn't that easy. But just it's been interesting to kind of, for me, is to watch the response to what people are hopefully learning more about Michael Jordan as he's pulled back the curtain. But, even after episodes, I think, 3 and 4, when they showed Michael hugging that trophy after we won the championship in 91, it kind of brought a tear to my eye because it was emotional, everything that we had gone through, and especially the fact that was a 3-year journey just to get to that championship in 91 to first of all get past the Pistons and also beat the big bad Lakers, who at that time had 11 championships for their organization where we had none.
Well, I don't know if it was you who said it in the documentary, Will, or was it another of your teammates saying that watching Jordan hug that trophy for the first time and get emotional and cry was kind of jarring to you as teammates because Jordan's only emotions that he showed were intensity, anger, not much outward love or crying emotion. Did that resonate with you? Is that you who said it in that documentary? I can't recall off the top of my head.
Yeah, it was. I said that was really a surprise to us because really the only emotions we had seen from Michael was, frustration and anger because of the inability to beat Detroit. I mean, this dude, he was not happy when he lost at anything. I mean, anything. That's how competitive he was. And, the inability to get past Detroit in 89, the inability to get past Detroit in 90. I mean, listen, to be honest, he always pointed the finger at himself first because as good as he was, he always thought he could get better. That's what made our practices so competitive. But he also expected everybody else to answer the bell. And that was the hard part. I mean, I think you can talk to a lot of guys, and I'll be the first to admit, I never questioned whether I could play in the NBA when I got drafted. Because when I got drafted to the Bulls, I questioned after the first couple practices in training camp in 1988 for the 88-89 season. I was like, damn, I don't know. I got to do something. It's not just going to be my work ethic that's going to gain the respect of this guy. It's going to take a lot more than that.
So what was it like being his teammate, Will?
It was tough because of the expectations. And I say this, not that Michael didn't understand how good he was, but I think at times, he felt that, listen, if you work as hard as me, you can be as good as me. And I think sometimes you had to, say, hey, no, that's not how it works, man. I mean, certain people are more talented than others, period. So, we're all out here busting our ass. We're all out here working our, butts off because we want to get better as well. But, at some point you have to learn that, we as players have certain limitations. But you have to be comfortable with those limitations. But you also have to trust that, hey, we're going to put in the time, we're going to put in the effort, and we'll be ready for for you when you decide to trust us, a la John Paxson, obviously Steve Kerr. I mean, even I was just watching, we're doing some stuff here in Chicago where we're playing all the 98 series. Mm-hmm. And in Game 7 against the Pacers, I mean, he actually made a couple, late game passes to Luke Longley, who knocked down a couple, baseline jump shots. And those were things that he didn't do early on in his career. Inside 6 minutes, he's like, listen, I got this. Whereas Phil Jackson kind of chipped away and said, if you really want to win a championship, the only way that's going to happen is if at some point you show your vulnerability and allow yourself to trust your teammates.
Well, and then we saw, obviously, Paxson was the one who was open to take care of the Lakers for that first championship that you're referring to, and then we all saw who made the dagger shot against the Suns in this past weekend.
Hold on, Rich. Now, I remember specifically, I think you were, if I remember correctly, weren't you in L.A. during that 91 championship? Did I not see you there covering?
You definitely did not see me there covering. I was in Staten Island, New York, as the Cub reporter for the Staten Island Advance, only dreaming of being on SportsCenter one day, which I was for your 99 Spurs championship, and I'm still holding my breath.
So I correct myself.
No, it's all good. I'm still holding my breath for those moments. I'm going to pop up with hair like Chris Fowler had this past weekend, and Dan Patrick's apparently going to have next. But in terms of being his teammate, I got Will Perdue here on the Rich Eisen Show. You fought him, right? You had a fight with Jordan in a practice. Correct?
Yes.
That's a true story.
So let me clarify two things.
Please.
One, I apologize, but I actually remember talking to you when I worked for ESPN Radio during the Lakers Celtics finals.
Maybe that's it. Sure. There you go.
So, that's the other thing. I'm 55, but because I play basketball, I still feel like I'm in my 20s because I never looked at it as a real job. So everybody I came across, I apologize, I always thought was older than me because they had a real job.
It's all good, man.
But we had a situation in practice, and that's what I mean, the intensity. I mean, we got in arguments all the time, and I always clarify, listen, when you want to talk about the NBA, there's no such thing really as an NBA fight. Every once in a while, you saw what was truly a fight. But NBA fights are more like skirmishes. You push a guy, you get in the guy's face, you point a finger. NBA, a fight is described as, somebody steps in the middle and you're like, all right, now's my chance. You reach around a guy and throw a cheap shot because the other guy can't reach back at you because there's somebody in between you. But we had an episode in practice where we were running the high-frequency plays of our opponent, and I still to this day am pretty sure it was the Milwaukee Bucks. And the one thing we were trying to emphasize is that Milwaukee was going to continue to run Michael off a bunch of screens in the hopes that the last 6 minutes of the game, he'll be fatigued both mentally and physically and will think twice about, hey, I'm really going to look to attack the hoop and maybe start settling for jump shots, and because he's fatigued, be a little short and not be able to get to the free throw line and get points there. So we kept running this one play where I was setting screens on him. Got pretty good shots, as they say in the day. I was laying some wood, and one time I hit him pretty hard. He bounced up off the floor, and he said, listen, you do that again, I'm going to punch you. He used a little more colorful language. Mm-hmm. So as soon as that happened, Johnny Bach, who was the assistant coach that set up our defensive schemes, immediately yelled, run it again. So I thought to myself, hey, man, if I'm going to get punched by this guy, which I still didn't think he was going to do it, I'm going to make sure I get my money's worth. So I made sure it was an illegal screen. I don't think I ever stopped. I just ran right through him, knocked his ass to the ground. He got up and immediately just turned around and hauled off and swung at me, and I was able to duck just enough so he didn't get a square shot in the face, but kind of hit me across the side of the temple. But again, it wasn't like it turned into a debacle. Once I realized what happened, I kind of started to step towards him. Eddie Neely, who was on the team at the time, grabbed me from behind and just kind of said, oh, big boy, that's probably not a good idea. And then the other thing was we just, settled down, continued to practice. It wasn't like they separated practice and, oh, that's it, we're done. You guys got to go in a room and hash it out. We just kept practicing. That stuff happened a lot more than people think. Now, the actual punch, that wasn't didn't happen a lot. I know they're going to talk a lot about this upcoming week regarding Steve Kerr and MJ, but there were skirmishes all the time because you got to remember the guys on the second team, we were fighting against the guys in the first team trying to get more minutes, trying to replace those guys, trying to justify our position on a team. So the games for us, I don't want to say they were easy, but it was refreshing when we played games on those Bulls teams because of how competitive and how hard we went at it at practice.
Will Perdue here on the Rich Eisen Show. Did you have to have that environment, you think, in order to win as much as you did? I mean, was it necessary for you to have that edge and potential anger and dislike, Will?
Well, the answer is no, because, as you pointed out, I got traded to San Antonio for Dennis and ended up winning a championship there, but they had a totally different culture, a totally different atmosphere. But yet you had that competitiveness. You didn't necessarily have that anger. You didn't necessarily have the aggressiveness. But that was Michael Jordan. That was led by Michael Jordan. That's how Michael Jordan approaches the game. And, I know a lot of people are getting that opportunity to see Michael, and apparently episodes 7 and 8 open up a lot of a big can of worms, because I know the producer has been out there talking about, I'm really surprised Michael allowed us to do 7 and 8 the way we did it, because apparently it doesn't paint a very good light against him. But guys that played with him, we understood him. It took a little while, but you adjusted and you understood. But at the end of the day, I always say, if you want to understand who Michael Jordan was, and if you want to know the definition of a hard ass, but a guy that wanted to win at all costs, go back and look at his Hall of Fame speech. That was Michael Jordan being thankful, thanking those that doubted him to help motivate him throughout his career.
Well, you know what? The speech that I prefer to because that's the one where, obviously the crying Jordan, but there were people who also took a lot of offenses to what he said. His speech at Kobe's memorial was beautiful, just a beautiful, touching tribute from the GOAT to somebody who looked up to Michael, and I think is the only one who's been, would it be fair to say, in his area code of competitiveness, of red ass, of that sort of Mamba mentality, right? Will, would you say?
Yeah, because you saw during his time, as once he became the man in L.A., because Kobe even admits that, when I first got there, I tried to be a man, but everybody remembers me as the guy shooting air balls against Utah in the playoffs.
Right.
But he eventually became Jordan-esque, not necessarily in his accomplishments, but as an attempt to follow in Michael's shoes, but also, as you talked about, the red assness, the hardcore. I mean, how many guys came through the Lakers organization that he chewed up and spit out, that didn't get along with him, couldn't understand the mentality, weren't willing to make the sacrifices or play as hard, regardless of how good they were, and didn't last very long with the Lakers. He was very similar, and it was kind of interesting to hear him, talk about how he reached out, how Michael made the offer, and, how he referred to Michael as an older brother, and they got that. I think they got that part about him just in January of this year. And then to hear Michael talk about how he was a younger brother at, the memorial.
Few minutes left here with Will Perdue, NBC Sports Chicago, and former teammate of Michael Jordan's 3 championship seasons with Michael right here on the Rich Eisen Show. So you were there, obviously, when Michael retired for the first time. By the way, I was there as a Cub reporter for the Northwestern School of Journalism. I was in the Berto Center that day, and I just remember what a huge gathering it was and what a stunner it was. What was it like from your position? Because, again, that's a preview of what we're going to see this weekend. Will?
Same thing. I had heard whispers of it, but you were like, listen, the guy's in his prime.
Yep.
He's not going to retire. I understand what's going on, and what's happening with his father. I know how emotional that is. But we also felt that, with the loss of his father, where else would he want to be but on the basketball floor, to honor his father? But when it happened, same thing. I was actually not at the Berto Center. I watched on TV, and I was just, it was one of those things that once I heard it was a reality, I still couldn't believe it until I actually saw it. And then once I saw it and he mouthed those words, I just remember sitting there like, holy,
yeah.
And I was just like, where do we go? And then it was kind of like that moment of, where do we go from here?
Well, what was it like without him in that season?
Well, we had to reestablish our identity. And, huge credit goes to Horace Grant, to Scottie Pippen, and more so to Bill Cartwright, to maintain that edge, to talk about how competitive we still could be, how good we could be. And, we ended up winning 55 games because, it was – and I'm not saying it was easier for Phil, but, we kept hearing the same thing. We got to play with our chip on their shoulder. We got to show these guys that we can play without Michael. It's your duty to yourselves, and blah 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 blah. I make it a comparison to Doc Rivers, who I'm friends with. You know, he won Coach of the Year when he was with the Orlando Magic when they went 41-41. But Doc said he gave the same speech for 82 games. Those guys in the other locker room don't respect you. All right, let's go. It was kind of like Phil was using the same thing every game. Play with a chip on your shoulder. Prove to them that they're wrong. Show them how good you are without Michael Jordan.
Did you think Michael quit on you? I know it's a tough question to ask because we all know the emotions that was going on with him and his dad. But he was everything. Did you think he quit? Did the team think he quit on them and you?
No, absolutely not. I thought that he was looking for another challenge, quite honestly, and he found it in baseball. And, you know, he talked about his love for baseball as a youngster. And I don't want to say he got bored with basketball, but I think the Jordan rules had come out. There was a crack in the armor. It wasn't just be like Mike. There were a lot of things, you know, the gambling and the book and, you know, everything else. And I think that, I don't want to say it got to him, but I think part of him was tired of the drama that became being Michael Jordan. He just wanted to be a basketball player. And I think he also realized that because he wasn't an activist, he caught heat for that. You know, he wasn't Muhammad Ali. He caught heat for that. You know, he just wanted to be a basketball player. You saw last week, he said, hey, if that's selfish, then maybe it is, but I'm sorry, but that's who I am. I just wanted to eliminate all the distractions and be a basketball player. I think the distractions, I don't want to say they became too much, but I also believe that he wanted to try something new, and there weren't any distractions in baseball at the time. The only distraction was people were, you know, wondering, can he even do this?
Well, man, I could talk to you the rest of this hour, but I know you got other stuff to do, and I appreciate the call. Will, this is great. You're terrific recounting all this stuff, and you know, I appreciate you taking the time to lend a little bit more perspective here on the show to my viewers and listeners.
Well, I appreciate you having me. I'll say I'm slightly aggravated. It's the first time I've ever been on your show, but it is an honor, and thank you.
Well, we'll do it again. Will. How does that sound? We'll do it again. This is not our last dance. How does that sound?
Hey, as long as you lead, I'm good.
Okay, that's it. And if you try that one more time, I'm going to hit you. Okay, Will? Does that ring a bell?
I got you, man. I'll be ready.
Does that ring a bell? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for the time, Will. You take care.
You got it, Rich. Thank you.
You got it. Will Perdue. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.